Welcome to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is John Iadarola because it's Wednesday. What's up, John?
It's good. I'm in a perfectly normal mood. How are you doing?
Man, that is, I think that might be the first time you've lied about something, or at least the first time I've caught you lying about something.
That you know of. But no, I am very happy to be doing the show with you. That's the truth.
Well, I'm happy to have you do the show with me as well, John. I wanted to update the audience on how we're doing with our fundraising effort. So let's take a quick look at the thermometer. And, I don't remember what the number was yesterday, but this number seems pretty impressive. So we're at $92,033. Every month, we are trying to raise $200,000 to keep TYT sustainable, not indefinitely. We're only doing this fundraiser till the end of the year. And thank you to everybody who's contributed. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this show and get by on the, very few resources we get as independent media. So thank you again. Yeah. Lots of news to get to today. Go ahead.
I don't know, day by day, but I do think the last Wednesday show we did, we were at about 59. So that's pretty good for a week. People have been very supportive.
Nice. There's a lot of numbers flying around, right? In producing the show. So you just kind of lose track of which number is associated to which issue. So this is a number that makes me happy. Thank you so much to all of our supporters and all of our members, all the people who have consistently supported us throughout the years. And of course, you can become a member and get exclusive content by going to tyt.com/join. Alrighty, we start off with some updates to stories that we've covered throughout the week. This is a pretty big development, so let's get right to it. The Atlanta police officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks by shooting him literally in the back has been charged criminally. These are charges that were filed by the Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard. And the most important charge in question is the felony murder charge that he's facing. The district attorney has also charged the cop in this case, Garrett Wolf, 11 charges in total. So not only is he charged, but his colleague who was on the scene at the time is also facing 3 charges. His name is Devin Brosnan, and he is cooperating with authorities and has agreed to testify against his colleague, Garrett Wolf, who is the individual who opened fire and shot Brooks in the back. 2 of those bullets did hit him, and he died later in the hospital. And this is what people were asking for. They were asking for criminal charges, and these criminal charges have been filed, and Rolf will have his day in court.
Yeah. And I would say, I think a very minor version of what people want is for this sort of story to not be a story. First of all, because it wouldn't happen, because they wouldn't be trained to decide that it's easier to just shoot at a man in his back rather than actually chase him, or, God forbid, let him go and have to track him down later. But also that if something like this happens, yeah, that's what it's expected. He murdered this guy. He gets charged with murder, goes to jail. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be like, oh my God, thanks to the protests, it looks like maybe there will actually be justice. It shouldn't be a substantive or sort of newsworthy sort of consideration. But it is. And they didn't want to chase a guy. And so they shot him in the back. It's madness. And then everything they did afterward, imagine if let's say that they actually thought that this had to happen. It wasn't just a matter of how dare you defy me or make me chase you. After you shoot the person, how do you not do everything you possibly can with the training that you've got to save the person's life? They're not a threat to you anymore. They're not going anywhere. You don't even have to jog after them. You just let it happen. A couple minutes go by. You're worried about paperwork or, oh man, I wonder if there were cameras that caught this insane thing I did, rather than saving a person's life while it could potentially still have been saved.
I don't know why it shouldn't be controversial to say that there needs to be a high standard when officers use deadly force. That's really what this discussion is about. It's not about minimizing the severity of drunk driving. It's not to paint an angelic picture of every person who's been caught up in these cases of police brutality. This is about whether or not we're comfortable living in a society where cops get to decide whether you live or die. right? They get to carry out whatever version of justice is in their minds, and they get to do so without, allowing you to have your day in court, right? We're supposed to have those protections. People are supposed to have those rights. And so as the retired LAPD sergeant shared with CNN, it was a video that we shared earlier this week when we covered this story, you're supposed to, the police department, when they come across a situation like this where someone flees, and by the way, they did check Rayshard Brooks to see if he had any lethal weapons on him. He did not. So they knew that he wasn't an imminent threat to their lives, right? Mm-hmm. As the retired LAPD sergeant said in that CNN interview, you're supposed to create a perimeter in that area in order to catch him safely, put him in custody, and make sure that justice is served in that regard, right? And they didn't do that. Shooting someone in the back, the very nature of that indicates that he was not an imminent threat to that cop.
Yeah.
And you don't get to decide. You don't get to be the judge, jury, and executioner. We're supposed to have, some level of, I don't know, just
empathy.
I know, but we're not allowed to have empathy. We're not allowed to do an honest analysis of what's going on in this country. And I just don't understand it. I don't think anyone would be comfortable knowing that their family member died because anyone opened fire without giving them the opportunity to defend themselves in court, right? Yeah. Anyway, so sorry for that whole spiel. It's just so frustrating that it's a difficult concept for so many people to grasp.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and also really fast, one other quick consideration. You're in the parking lot of a Wendy's. Obviously, this is not off in some remote area in the woods or the desert. You're firing your gun totally needlessly. Not only did you kill someone, but you easily could have hit an innocent bystander nearby. When you fire your weapon, that bullet goes where it's going to go, and there are people around. You could have hit someone. There are people just filming in the area, and so that's incredibly dangerous. And also, I understand that we're in a particular type of bubble in that our job is to pay attention and try to be as tapped into the news and what's going on around the country as possible. And so we're going to be more cognizant of, what these big news stories are, what the moment is in the country. But imagine how many stories like this have come up just in the midst of all of the time since the protest started. That the nation is focused on excessive force and brutality. And that wasn't enough, let alone not to stop him from pulling his gun and shooting at this guy as he ran away. Basic humanity you should be trained to not do that. All of those considerations, the fact that people are filming, but even the fact that we're all focused like a laser on police brutality wasn't enough to stay his hand in this case and in so many cases over the past few weeks.
And by the way, we are learning more about what happened and what Devin Brosnan's, role in all of this was. So new reporting indicates that after the shooting, Rolf said, quote, "I got him." We knew about that already. And then kicked him. We didn't know about that until recently. And Brosnan then stood on Brooks's shoulder. And Howard said, and that's the district attorney that I was referring to earlier, the officers did not provide medical aid to Brooks for more than 2 minutes after he was shot. Look, it's just about questioning whether we're comfortable with this. We're supposed to, again, have a justice system that deems us innocent until proven guilty. And that means that no one on the streets, including cops, should have the ability to decide whether we live or die if we do not pose an imminent threat to their lives, period. Yeah. All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit. And there's a lot going on in the country. And I know that our coverage of COVID hasn't been as consistent as, we've been focusing on other issues in the country, especially police brutality and racism. But I think it's time to do an in-depth analysis of what's really happening with this pandemic and how we're actually moving backwards when it comes to COVID. So there are dozens of states in the U.S. that are experiencing a pretty significant uptick in the number of new coronavirus cases. And to make matters worse, we are hearing nothing but complete and utter lies from the federal government on how various states are doing. Now, the entire picture is not bleak. There are some states that have shown some improvement, but when it comes to various states, and I think you're going to notice a trend here, including Florida, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, there is an uptick, and part of the reason why is because of the premature opening of businesses in that area. Yes, there have been demonstrations and protests as well. And more importantly, there hasn't really been any leadership or any emphasis on the importance of using masks by our federal government. So let me give you some of these details. Let's start off with Florida. Florida recorded almost 2,800 new coronavirus cases on Monday of this week. That's the highest number of new and confirmed cases in a single day the state has seen, and that's according to the Florida Department of Health. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis absolutely refuses to ever shut down the state again. He told reporters back on May 20th that there actually wouldn't even be a second wave. But unfortunately, we're seeing the second wave already when this wave was expected to happen later in the year in fall. So Ron DeSantis said, quote, "We succeeded, and I think people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative. It challenges their assumption. So they got to try to find a boogeyman." More than 2 million people, by the way, in the United States have been infected with coronavirus, and 116,962 have died. And that's according to Johns Hopkins University. Health experts are warning that more infections and deaths are in store as states continue their reopening plans. And by the way, I know that we are very critical of the politicians in these red states, but it would be unfair of me to not mention that we're seeing an increase in California as well. And businesses in California have been opening. And I think that there, of course, are going to be consequences to that if people aren't implementing social distancing.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to when we see these rises coming in particular states or particular regions, is there going to be something done in response? So we've had day after day after day in Texas, for instance, of record-breaking hospitalizations, not like hospitalizations during the second wave, just hospitalizations overall, more than during the first wave. And I know that Dr. Fauci says we're still in the first. It's dishonest to say that we're done with that. I mean, think about it. If at the very beginning of this entire process, like 3 months ago, I had told you that like 400 to 900 people will be dying every day. That's sort of the recent numbers over the past week or two. You would think that that was absolutely horrendous. Well, that's just the norm that nobody even really pays much attention to that we have right now. And yeah, you're right. California is seeing a rise as well. I just saw in LA County specifically, so not America, not California, just LA County, we passed 3,000 deaths. Imagine one thing killing 3,000 people just in the city that we're in right now, let alone the more than 120,000 that have died nationally. It is insane. It is suicidal that we ignore it to the extent that we do, and that we tolerate so much death, and that when the numbers start to rise, we'll see if DeSantis and if Abbott take it seriously, but so far they've given no indication that anything will be done. I'm not even talking about lockdowns. They're obviously not going to do any lockdowns or anything like that. All of their voters think that lockdowns are, that they're ways that you set fire to the Constitution or whatever. But they're not even asking for masks. In Texas right now, you can go to the supermarket, no mask. Totally fine. It's so weird that the cases are going up, considering this incredibly lax situation.
Yeah. So regarding the masks, there have been studies that show that masks are 85% effective in preventing the spread of coronavirus, which is why it's so important. Please, if you're out there, if you're, grocery shopping, please think about the lives you save simply by wearing a mask. There's so many people who have coronavirus, but they're asymptomatic. A very good friend of mine is a therapist, and she called me recently and she was like, "Hey, I got to go get tested because I found out that a colleague of mine did test positive and she's completely asymptomatic." So there are plenty of people who are asymptomatic. You might have it and be asymptomatic, completely unaware that you're spreading it. So my point is, be smarter than what the Trump administration is advocating for, okay? Protect your life, protect the lives of others. Please wear a mask. And I will say there is a significant difference between some of the Trump-supporting protesters and the protesters who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Because if you look at videos, they seem to take the mask situation very seriously. And, they've made a decision that this movement is important to them and they're willing to go out there and fight for justice. And I respect that. But definitely wear a mask and do what you can to prevent spreading, this horrible virus to other people. I do also want to share a little snippet from Anthony Fauci's interview with NPR's 1A. It looks like he and the president are not having as many conversations as they used to when it comes to responding to the pandemic. Let's take a listen.
Tell us, when was the last time you actually spoke with President Trump?
Not last week, but the week before. Okay. I spoke with him when we made the presentation to explain to him our vaccine development efforts. So it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So again, we're in the middle of a pandemic where 21 states are seeing an upward trend of new coronavirus cases. The president has already checked out. He is not having as much communication with Anthony Fauci as he should be. And he's also, of course, in the process of getting ready for this massive Tulsa, Oklahoma rally, his first rally since March. And he is not encouraging people to wear masks during this rally.
Yeah. They say that they are going to be handing out masks to everyone there. But the camera's going to be rolling. We'll get to see, given a mask. The Trump campaign gives you a mask as a Trump fan. We'll see if they actually wear it. It's like if Trump wins after doing nothing through the most horrendous domestic emergency that I pray we will experience through the course of our life, think about all that it will say about the expectations that people have of their leadership, what they'll allow, what they're okay with. He was sort of pretending to take it seriously when he was wasting our time with talk about bleach and UV lights and, hydroxychloroquine and stuff like that. That at least his mind was ostensibly on the pandemic. He doesn't even do that. Maybe a comment yesterday about how they developed an AIDS vaccine, which isn't true. And that's really about it for him. He doesn't care. It's like a little baby. He got bored with it and he moved on. And now he just wants to stand in a rally and have people clap for him.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we have more updates on coronavirus for you. And you don't want to miss it. Lots of important details there. And then later in the show, yes, of course, we're going to talk about some of the allegations that John Bolton is lodging against the Trump administration in his upcoming book. Lots of drama there. We'll have that and more when we return.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. I wanted to remind you all that if you are online right now, which if you're watching this, you're definitely online, make sure you protect your online activity, use a VPN, and use one that you can get a fat discount on. And one of our partners, NordVPN, will give you 70% off for 3 years, plus you get a free month when you sign up specifically at nordvpn.com/TYT. All right, I wanted to read some member comments, and there are some great ones that I wanted to mention. So first, Cousin Vinny thanks us for mentioning California as one of the states that's seeing an uptick in coronavirus cases. No problem. I mean, it's devastating. We live in California, but Vinny is absolutely right. We've experienced a rise in the number of coronavirus cases for 3 to 4 weeks now. And we didn't avoid mentioning it for any like nefarious purpose. It's just there's so much going on in the world with the news. And like I say, every day is frustrating because I feel like we don't get to so many things that I want to talk about. Mickey C says, glad the other cop will testify, but his career is over and he will need to watch his back for a very long time. And by the way, he is facing 3 charges of his own. And my guess is his decision to testify is to, cover his own butt. And in the super chat comments, we have Latoya Williams, who says, I upgraded my membership. Go TYT. Thank you. And McCowell D says, I was wondering if you all had covered the story of the missing Texas soldier, Vanessa Guillen, yet. No, I actually have not come across that story. I promise you we will look into it. Thank you for that tip. All right, well, let's move on to the rest of the news because, unfortunately, we have a lot of misinformation coming from the Trump administration on this pandemic. So the Wall Street Journal has decided to publish an op-ed penned by Vice President Mike Pence, which completely denies that there is a second wave of coronavirus. In fact, he attempts to completely rewrite recent history by lying about Trump's disastrous handling of coronavirus. I am not going to regurgitate or repeat his lies, but I will debunk some of the nonsense that he shared in that op-ed, which is going to lead to people losing their lives. Let's not sugarcoat it in any way. He writes, the media has taken to sounding the alarm bells over a second wave of coronavirus infections. Such panic is overblown. Thanks to the leadership of President Trump and the courage and compassion of the American people, our public health system is far stronger than it was 4 months ago, and we are winning the fight against the invisible enemy. Now, 21 states are seeing an uptick in the number of new coronavirus cases. Many of those states are red states. California is included in that list, even though California is not a red state. But this goes to show you that this is a severe virus that is easily spread through human contact. It's airborne. The only state that seems to have gotten it 100% right is Vermont, where their numbers have gone down drastically. So Vermont has seen a decrease of at least 50% of new coronavirus cases. But anyway, going back to the lies told by Mike Pence, Eliza Relman over at Business Insider did a good job debunking point by point all of the nonsense in this Wall Street Journal op. She writes, Pence celebrated that the daily average infection rate has dropped to about 20,000 new cases per day. Okay, let's just stop for a second, John. Who would celebrate 20,000 new people contracting this virus per day? Okay, fine. So that's what's happening in the Trump administration. They're celebrating this. It's down from a high of about 30,000 in April. And he pointed out that daily COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. have declined to 750 over the last 5 days. The highest daily death count came on May 1st when 2,909 people in the United States died of coronavirus in 24 hours. Now, here's what's important to keep in mind. As Relman writes, the vice president failed to mention that coronavirus cases are on the rise in over 20 states, 21 to be exact, many of the same places that were quick to loosen social distancing orders and reopen businesses. And overall, new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. have begun to plateau, not decline. Intensive care units in Arizona, for instance, are now overwhelmed after the state's governor was slow to shut down and, of course, quick to reopen. John, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Arizona's certainly one of the rough ones. I was just, I follow a Twitter account that compiles daily information, and Texas, once again, broke records. Not in cases, although, yes, that too, hospitalizations. And so, and the reason I always stress hospitalizations is because the right-wingers are always going to come back and say, well, we're testing more. And like Trump says, it's a double-edged sword. More tests, you're going to have more cases. Okay, maybe. But tests don't magically require people to have extended stays in hospitals. And that's what we're seeing. Hospitalizations are going down in some states. They've fallen drastically in New York and Illinois, New Jersey, a number of other states outside of the South, the Southwest. But Texas is going up. Arizona's going up. Other states like North Carolina, South Carolina are going up as well, although not as fast. That should change policy. That should scare people into pushing for something, because what it seems like we're seeing, and this is to some extent what we had predicted, was the entire country was slow to shut down, perhaps understandably so, I guess. I don't know. And there was no leadership, certainly. The places that were initially hit are the places you would expect. They're coastal blue states that people travel to, largely. And so the entire country shut down. Much of the country hadn't really been hit by it that much at that point. Those parts of the country were the quickest to reopen. And now, what do you know? It's starting to spread. And those areas are probably not going to shut down. Texas is probably not going to initiate a statewide lockdown. And so those 2,800 people that are hospitalized today as a resulting coronavirus, in 2 weeks, how many of them will have died? And how many more people will be sick by then?
Right. I mean, I think it's also important to note, a lot of health experts are saying, there's there's a few days, a week between when a person contracts the virus and when they end up in the hospital. And there are predictions by these health experts that the number of people checking into the hospital because they have this virus is likely to increase. Now, it's different state by state, but one thing that I do want to point out is that there's this narrative arguing that the reason why we're seeing an uptick is because we've actually improved with testing. And that is not something that explains the uptick in coronavirus cases. I'll explain why in just a minute. But first, I want you to hear from Mike Pence, who had a call with governors telling them all sorts of misleading information and encouraging them to implement the misinformation and the bad advice that's coming from the Trump administration. Take a listen.
I would just encourage you all, as we talk about these things, make sure and continue to explain to your citizens the magnitude of increase in testing. In most of the cases where we are seeing some marginal rising number, that's more a result of the extraordinary work you're doing expanding testing.
So unfortunately, that's not true. I really wish it were true, but it's not. So let's take Oklahoma, for example. The Oklahoman wrote about this, and here's what the journalist Randy Ellis had to say. The spike in confirmed COVID-19 cases can't be attributed to more testing. The state actually performed more tests the week of May 17th, but the number of tests that came back positive in the week that followed was only 1.8%. Last week, it was 4.6% of the tests coming back positive. Mm-hmm. So it's not, my point is, and the point of health experts is, no, this is not because we've increased testing. We're seeing either less testing or a stable amount of testing week to week, right? No difference in the amount of testing. And we're still seeing more people test positive in these 21 states. It's just devastating. And the fact that governors are encouraged to spread this kind of misinformation by our vice president is truly pathetic, because people are going to lose their lives. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and aside from just the obvious human cost of if it's allowed in all of these states to continue to spread, and to some extent they seem to be very willing to hide this information. So like one of the reasons I'm focusing on some states' hospitalization numbers is because some states don't even report it. Like Florida has had a huge upsurge in cases. Oddly, 2 to 3 weeks after their full reopening, the cases have gone 3 times higher than they were during the first wave. But Florida doesn't report hospitalization, so I have no idea. I can't say. Weird that they're being so, keeping their cards so close to the chest, or they're close to the vest on that. But anyway, what I don't understand, aside from the human cost, is as an electoral strategy, every week we get a week closer to the election, and they seem to, like, this is a strategy that's the end goal seems to be, we want these numbers to be as high as they were initially as we launch into the general election. I just don't get it. Pragmatically, why wouldn't you want to protect people when your jobs are on the line?
I want to just read a message from one of our viewers, Isabel Amelia Thompson, who contributed to TYT through YouTube Super Chat. Very generous amount. Thank you so much. And this is her message. I think it's important to read it because I'm really down for obvious reasons. It's just these types of stories are pretty devastating to think about all day, every day. But she says, I found TYT through Google, first in search results. And Cenk was sort of losing his bad word over the mistreatment of trans people. And Anna and her salt are 75% of the reason why I stayed. Keep up the truth fight. Anna is my spirit animal. Hashtag, I want that cool shirt. Hashtag, I love you too, John. So thank you so much, Isabel. I really appreciate it. Like, I need that support. You know, it's not beneath me to admit that. It's tough. One of our viewers actually the significant other of one of our viewers wrote in today on Twitter and said, hey, my partner is obsessed with your show, but it's having like a negative impact on his mental health. So Can you address that? And you know what? Yes, I will address it. It's a very difficult time for a lot of people. Consuming this kind of news, thinking about these difficult topics is hard on everyone who actually cares, who's genuine and sincere about wanting to change this system. So I think it's important, like, to take a breather from this news when you can and just kind of like take a deep breath, go for a walk, which is what I do when I'm really, really stressed out. And just hang in there, guys. I'm really inspired by the protesters out there. I'm inspired by Black Lives Matter. The fact that they were completely defamed over and over again, but they persisted and they're pushing for real change. So there are positive things to focus on too. It's just that we're in the middle of this fight. And sometimes it's hard to lose track of where we're at. All right, well, let's move on to what's going on in Tulsa. We have time, we can do it. So Oklahoma is unfortunately one of the 21 states that are experiencing a troubling surge in new coronavirus cases, and the numbers reveal the consequences of businesses opening early. Now, of course, it's important to focus on what's happening in Oklahoma and Tulsa specifically, since Donald Trump is planning on doing his rally in a few days. He's going to do his first rally since March in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, one of the health experts at OU Medicine told the Oklahoman this: we have reached a peak that is higher than at any other point in the pandemic here in the state. We are bending the curve, sadly, in the wrong direction. Again, this is a medical expert, a health expert in the state of Oklahoma who is concerned about this troubling trend. Yesterday actually marked the highest single day total of new coronavirus cases in the state of Oklahoma. Tulsa County actually surpassed Oklahoma County on Monday and now leads the state in the cumulative number of COVID-19 tests with 1,729 cases. Oklahoma County has reported 1,673 positive cases. Now, unfortunately, Trump is still planning on doing this rally, John. And when he was recently asked by reporters how Oklahoma fares in the coronavirus numbers, Trump just did what he typically does. He lied. Take a look.
Well, Oklahoma's done very well. I just spoke to the governor. He's very excited about it. Governor Stitt, who's done a terrific job. Mike, I think you can maybe speak to this. He's done a great job. Oklahoma's at a very low number. They've done really fantastic work. They have a pretty new, magnificent arena. As you probably have heard, we have a 22,000-seat arena, but I think we're going to also take the convention hall next door, and that's going to hold 40,000.
Yeah, I just feel pretty sick to my stomach. And as you guys know, anyone who goes to his rally needs to essentially agree. It's like a waiver indicating that if they contract the virus by going to this rally, they cannot hold Trump or the campaign accountable.
Yeah. He just lied. They just set a record yesterday in number of cases. Now, they're not doing as bad as some places. Maybe say that, stress that, rather than just lying. And lying to hold an event that is definitely going to get some people sick. I mean, think about the other cases where we've warned about this sort of thing, when they held an election and we said seems crazy because of coronavirus, and then it turned out that people got sick as a result. These big events. Do we know of, in the past few months, any other 40 to 60,000 person gathering where people just crammed into a big building? Like, has there been anything? Like, concerts were canceled, conventions were canceled. How? And the thing too, he mentioned there that they're going to put an additional 40,000 people in a secondary convention center. And so we talked about this in the damage report, and I showed it on the map. It's like 2 blocks away from the place where the actual rally is. So they're putting 40,000 people, twice as big of a crowd, in another building that Trump isn't going to be in. Mm-hmm. So, like, maybe they'll have big screens or something like that?
I don't get it. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this is something that you can watch on television if you're passionate about Trump. But, also, let me just correct my answer, because there have been mass gatherings in the context of these protests, right? And so this is, look, so let's play devil's advocate, because I think that this argument is made with a sincerity by some people who mean well. They're not all crazy lunatic Trump supporters. There are some people who are like, look, if we're going to be critical of these political gatherings, then if we're concerned about the spread of coronavirus, can't we say the same thing about these protests? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you can say that. But I guess we should also think about priorities too, right? And so I just think that fighting for change because people keep getting murdered by cops is different from attending like a WWE-like political rally that you have fun at because you get to yell and shout and talk about how much you hate people who are different than you. I just think that's different, right? Those are my political values, though. I mean,
No, you don't have to apologize for this. So again, like Dr. Fauci said yesterday, outside is better than inside. No crowd is better than crowd. Small crowd is better than big crowd. This is a gigantic indoor crowd. It's literally the worst case scenario, and it isn't pushing for an end to police brutality. And they wear masks at the protests. We're going to see. I could be wrong. They're handing out masks to everybody in Tulsa. Maybe we'll flip on the TV and it'll just be masks. I'm guessing probably not. But however much lower a priority going to a rally, I think, should be than, trying to stop cops from killing people, you have to admit that going to a 40,000 person rally that isn't even the Trump rally has got to be a lower priority. To just 100%. Cram into a stadium, to not even be at the rally, to risk getting coronavirus, to not even hear him speak is madness. But that's what they're doing. And Trump added that after all of the criticism of the rally. He doubled down saying, no, I'm going to expose 3 times as many people, and they're not even going to be in the room with me.
Exactly. And by the way, I just want to note that there's a difference in culture between the two different groups, right? Protesters understand the importance of wearing masks. They take coronavirus seriously, right? And not every single person, but what you see in video after video after video is that they're not having some like allergic reaction to wearing masks. When it comes to Trump supporters, though, the situation is very different. The Oklahoman spoke to a number of Trump supporters who are already camping out for the rally. And they seem to not think this is a big deal at all. I'm going to go to the last 3 graphics in this story, starting with James Massery, who's a Trump supporter, said the following. I'm sorry, this is from Tulsa World, not the Oklahoman. So James Massery tells Tulsa World, whether I get it, whether or not I get it, it doesn't bother me in the least. If I get it, I'll deal with it. If it takes me out, it's just going to make me mad that I can't vote for Trump in this coming election. Harrison Grimward, who's another Trump supporter who's been camping out. I'm sorry, Harrison Grimward is actually the reporter, and he talks about Daryl Henry, who's also camping out for the rally. And he said, one must not fear. He was also quoted as saying, we've paid enough sacrifices, we've taken enough precautions, and let's get back to it. Let's get back to opening our country. So there's just a difference in culture and a difference in taking this seriously. And I think that's important to point out. We have to take a break. When we come back, we have more for you, including, I can't believe this is actually real, but there is a right-wing extremist group who refer to themselves as Boogaloos. We'll give you the details on that when we come back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your active ID more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. All right, I want to make sure we fit in as many stories as possible, so I'll go through this quickly. Oh Boy says, a lot of companies put out BLM messages to show support for the movement. I don't know if TYT did or not, and I love that I don't have to wonder where they stand because they've been yelling it for years. Much love to TYT. Yeah, so look, I find it super cheesy when corporations like put out these like messages of support when they've ignored issues like this for a long time, which is why, like, for me, the performative stuff, it just turns me off. And I hope that no one is under the impression that because I don't put out like this, like, here is my official statement on Black Lives Matter. Like, it doesn't mean I don't care about it. I care about it deeply. I just don't want to do like surface level, shallow BS that doesn't really matter. You know, that's kind of where I'm at with messages. Yeah. Harles Macy says Trump is going full blown Jim Jones, but the deaths will come slowly. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something associated with the right wing. It's pretty devastating. So 2 men who are part of a right-wing extremist group have been arrested and are facing federal charges in connection to the murder of a federal officer. So this tragic story starts on May 29th when a protective security officer named David Patrick Underwood was gunned down in Oakland by a man named Stephen Carrillo, who's part of the so-called Boogaloo Boys. And look, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time I heard about this group, I didn't take it seriously. And I learned that Boogaloo and the ridiculous name of this extremist group is on purpose, so people don't take it seriously. But unfortunately, there are members of this extremist group who have used the Black Lives Matter protests as a cover to carry out acts of extreme violence, to murder officers. And in this case, there was the federal officer who was shot and killed. And in the second case, there was yet another cop who was shot. And so I'm going to go to this video where a CNN reporter explains in detail how this case developed, and then I'll give you some more details. Let's take a look.
As the Black Lives Matter protests were taking place and law enforcement was trying to keep people safe during these protests, these 2 men were in communication that they were not connected to these protests at all, but they were going to use it as a cover to scope out and kill law enforcement. So on May 29th, they drove to the Oakland federal courthouse, the federal building. They staked out 2 law enforcement officers who were outside the federal building. One of them was Pat Underwood, and then in the drive-by shooting, murdered Underwood. Then there was a call from the public, asked for help from law enforcement to the public to look for the getaway vehicle, in the vehicle that was used in the drive-by shooting, a van. Well, the public then responded, and law enforcement on June 6th was brought to Carrillo's house, and it was there that he also then attacked the sheriff's deputies who were responding, killing Sergeant Damon Guts Willer.
So there are both federal charges and state charges in connection to what Carrillo did. Federal prosecutors on Tuesday charged Carrillo with murder and attempted murder and leveled aiding and abetting charges against Robert Alvin Justice Jr., who has admitted to serving as the getaway driver in the courthouse ambush that happened. In addition to those federal charges, by the way, Carrillo faces a murder charge in the slaying of Santa Cruz County Sheriff Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller, as was mentioned toward the end of that video. So I'll give you more details about what this group is about, but these two people had communication. They had an online exchange where they made it clear that they saw the Black Lives Matter movement as an opportunity, as a way to, like, I guess, camouflage themselves to carry out these acts of violence. And then Black Lives Matter protesters would be blamed for it, of course. Now, luckily, there was enough of an investigation to figure out that this was carried out by right-wing extremists. But it's just, I'm happy they're in custody, but that ideology still exists. These are anti-government, extreme right-wing individuals.
Yeah, and apparently so committed to this idea that the shooter apparently scrawled catchphrases of the Boogaloo movement in his own blood after being shot. Yeah, and this is only, exactly what we said would happen initially. I mean, I assumed that they would try to kill protesters, and there are other right-wingers that are doing that. This one decided to attack cops, and presumably to get the cops to then harshly attack the protesters, which the cops apparently didn't need any stimulus to do. They did it on their own. And this is what we predicted. And probably equally as easy to predict is that the right wing, which was really interested in this case, stopped talking about it the second they found out that this guy was involved in the Boogaloo movement. And you had tweets from Charlie Kirk about, like, did his life not matter too? With a little thinking face. Has no update. Hasn't said anything since we found out. Not interested. They're on something else. They don't care about violence. They care about blaming it on Antifa, which has oddly been absent for weeks and weeks and weeks now. It seems mostly like right-wingers, the KKK, and militia members that are shooting people and trying to run them down all over the country.
Well, let me give you a little more information about this Boogaloo group. So they have one main uniting theme behind their so-called movement. It's the belief in and support for a civil war against a tyrannical government. Beyond that, the Boogaloo ideology is flexible. They like to dress up in Hawaiian shirts because when they go to, like, for instance, Black Lives Matter protests, they consider it like going to the party because they see it as an opportunity to carry out the violence that they want to carry out. Many of those who claim an allegiance to the far-right movement, which is made up largely of young white men, frequently carry rifles and espouse a need to defend the Second Amendment. According to the Anti-Defamation League, some Boogaloo adherents oppose government overreach and advance libertarian ideas embraced by militias and gun rights groups. Others openly spread white supremacist rhetoric and encourage a race war. So, I mean, look, we talked about that anti-government militia in New Mexico. One of those members opened fire against protesters, and the protester remains in the hospital in critical condition. This is an ongoing problem. This isn't something that sprung up out of nowhere, by the way. Like, there have been issues with right-wing extremism in this country for a long time now. And I remember in 2009, under the Obama administration, there was a tremendous amount of pressure to disband a specific group of investigators within the Department of Homeland Security who were tasked with investigating homegrown right-wing extremists. Conservative politicians didn't like it. They fought the Obama administration on it, and that group did disband. And there are consequences to that, and we're unfortunately dealing with it today. All right, let's get to the final story because the brazen nature of this elected official is just absolutely disgusting. Protesters continue to topple Confederate statues across the country, while in some parts of the country, elected officials refuse to move the monuments, even if the monuments are on public land. So, for instance, in northeastern Mississippi, one elected official argued that, look, the real problem is slavery. But it's not that slavery was the problem, it's what happened after slavery. He alleges that it made African Americans, quote, dependent. So this is in Lowndes County. It's 53% white, 45% black. And in this northeastern Mississippi county, supervisors voted along racial lines against moving a Confederate monument that has stood outside the county courthouse in Columbus since 1912. The monument depicts a Confederate soldier and says the South fought for a noble cause. Let me just remind you that noble cause in their minds is slavery. They fought to continue enslaving people in this country. At one point during the meeting, a white supervisor, Harry Sanders, said moving the monument would solve nothing and would be an attempt to erase history. After the meeting, Sanders, a Republican, of course, was quoted by the Commercial Dispatch as saying that other groups of people who had also been mistreated in the past, he cited Irish, Italian, Polish, and Japanese immigrants, were able to successfully assimilate afterwards. And then let me give you this disgusting quote, John, and I want to hear your thoughts. The only ones, he says, that are having the problems, guess who? The African Americans. You know why? In my opinion, they were slaves, and because of that, they didn't have to go out and earn any money. They didn't have to do anything. Whoever owned them took care of them, fed them, clothed them, worked them, also lynched them, beat them, brutalized them, dehumanized them. Of course, he didn't mention any of those things. Raped them. And this is an elected official, a county supervisor in the area who just said this out in the open as if there's nothing wrong with that kind of statement.
And we still have to respond to people on our level or higher in terms of their reputation in the media who just assert there's no racism. The GOP, I mean, after all, come on. Lincoln was a Republican. These are serious things that they say.
Yeah, absolutely. The rest of his quote was, they became dependent, and that dependency is still there. The Democrats right here who depend on the black vote to get elected, they make them dependent on them. And by the way, that disgusting framing is used by Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Republicans in general. I mean, we've heard it by the Trump administration so many times, and it's just, this exists. Like, it's out in the open. It's overt. There's no hiding it. There's no attempt to hide it. So we need to just stop having a debate about whether this country has a race problem, because the debate doesn't need to be had. It's already clearly demonstrated by so many elected officials out in public right now. All right, in the post-game show today, we have many stories for you that you don't want to miss, including, yes, we will talk about the officer who had a meltdown over her delayed breakfast sandwich from McDonald's. We're also going to talk about the censorship that Trump is engaging in when it comes to actual books that are published or will be published about him. We'll give you that and more when we do our postgame today. Become a member, tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.